Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
I'm your co-host, Rich Gear, and believe it or not, today I'm going to let Doug do most of the talking, mainly because he just had a great trip.
How is that possible,
How is
Rich?
that possible? I'm getting my jibes in now, but he's going to carry. He went on a couple of he went on an adventure this last week and went to several interesting places, and we're going to talk.
Our TV cameraman Larry Perry accompanied me on this trip, and we went to a place I've known about for about 40 years, wanted to visit for quite some time, and it's something that I've written about, but I've wanted to actually see it for myself.
What really gets me, Doug, is I couldn't go this last time, but I've been there before. I didn't realize there was a big fossil bed there.
Yeah.
And he picked these fossils up right off the beach. I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay, this is a place called Joggins, and it's in Nova Scotia. And we flew into Boston Airport and then drove all day to get to this place. And it was interesting because it was sunny all the way up to the spot, but right at the edge of, it's right where Bay of Fundy comes to a point. And we find out that the geology of the area causes the tides to come in and go out. It funnels right in, and so what you get is a high tide. Sometimes it gets up to 60 feet.
Now, Doug, you were telling me something. I remember I thought this last week. What is the erosion factor when you have water coming in at such high pressure, or is it high, low, medium?
Oh, it's pretty heavy erosion, and in fact, one of the rivers that backs up when the tide it actually flows backwards. One of the rivers is called the Chocolate River because there's so much sediment in it.
Oh, okay.
And when it drains out, you get quite an action of mud flowing back and forth within this river. And this area is, there's fossil cliffs at this spot at Joggins. There was actually a coal mine there at one point in time where they mined the coal out of it. But it's really interesting to me because these strata are tilted on an angle. And if you follow the strata from the cove down at the end, where the cliffs start, all the way down to where it ends, there's about 18,000 feet of successive layers of rock that represent these cliffs.
Okay.
But basically, the fossils that are found in them are they're almost all of them the same. Which okay, that's the one thing to remember is that the fossils are pretty much the same, except when you get more to the top of them, these tree-like fossils sort of vanish out of sight. And
oh yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit about that, what that means.
Well, one thing I want to ask you, Doug, as I was looking just through he's got a little booklet here, but did they talk about this bottom part mainly? It sounded like it was mainly the Carboniferous period. Is that what it's supposed to?
Yeah, and the evolutionists say that this represents 10 million years of evolution. Well,
all right.
10 in terms of evolutionary time, that's a very short time to lay down 18,000 feet of strata. That's 3 times the size of the Grand Canyon.
Wow. Wow.
And so there's a problem there. And then the second is that you see that these tree trunks extend up through multiple layers of strata.
So they are actually polystrate fossils.
Polystrate fossils. And it is pretty easy to find these polystrate trees. And I've got a whole bunch of pictures of these because, here's actually a piece of one that we picked up off the beach, and this is I believe it's called
take a look at that for a second.
Sigillaria, and yeah, this one's a Sigillaria.
That's a Sigillaria?
Yeah, and
I'm just kind of wiping this off a little bit.
And
so
actually, you can see the bark on it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Now, what was interesting is that they found these fossils here, and this is actually Sigillaria inside of the bark. And so what you have
you got different colorations here, Doug. So
they gave these different names, thinking that they were actually different kinds of plants, but they're the same plant.
Wow! Now, how do they? Now, if I was looking at that one or this one, how would you know? How do you know they're the same plant?
Well, because they found, like, this is actually a good example here.
Okay.
Underneath the bark here, this is a sigillary bark, but underneath it is the this sort of.
Oh, I see. Okay, so the actual wood pulp, tree part, and then this is the bark. Okay, I got you. I got you. So
this is an indication that they were buried very rapidly. You know, because if you expect that millions of years of slow deposition would have laid these down
Right.
in little layers of, you know, maybe as an annual layer. This would
and that's kind
take
of
a long time to form, but it would also indicate that the tree trunks would have rotted away
Right.
before it would have had time to actually fossilize.
Yeah, that's a general thing. I think before we go, just a you know, an old thing. When you say polystrate, poly means many, and straight from strata. So it's a many.
Right.
The tree trunks go through many strata, which each strata represents. Well, don't they usually say it's like a year? It's like tree ring growth almost. I mean, I suppose that to me that makes no sense on the face of it. The way nature is, nothing is that consistent. Number one, catastrophism would basically belie that. In modern times, you could see that where things get buried quickly. But as you said, and we've talked about the ones at Specimen Ridge and other places, Doug, the same problems come, as you just said. Now, what I want to know is, are the root systems intact here?
Yeah, there are some roots you can find there. And what was interesting also is that there are very few of them that they find in a prone position, where they're actually tipped over. And when they are, they're actually flattened, because these are actually fairly unstable in terms of being woody. You know, they're woody plants, but they don't really have a lot of substance to them, according to what they've studied them.
They're not strong
plants.
Well, that's what I was asking. Would these have been the deposition? You know, we believe these probably would have been laid down in the what, the first part of the flood? Probably the first part of the flood with the deposition. But Doug, with these,
so you'd have these tilted strata. I mean, the strata laid down in rapid succession, all on top of each other. And what you see is that these fossil trees are actually in, if you follow one polystrate tree, and it's up here, follow that same layer down a little bit, you'll maybe find another one extending up through that same strata.
Wow.
And what it shows me is that, you know, there were waves and waves of fossilization and deposition that took place. And I believe, and Ian Juby agrees with me on this, is that these are tidal depositions. So
and I think
4
part
times
of the
a
flood
day
seems to indicate it was tidal in nature. Yeah.
4 times a day you had these huge tides that would have been exacerbated because of the global covering of the earth with water.
Well, that's what it said. I mean, in the book of Genesis, it talks about the waters going to and fro over the earth.
Yes.
And that indicates, at least, you know, indirectly, that there's a back and forth kind of action, which for, I mean, until the whole world was actually covered, gives you some time for certain things to happen. Well, let me ask you this, Doug. Do you think that these trees, basically because of the nature of the tree or whatever, were laid down, did they get fossilized or buried differently than the ones at Specimen Ridge? Do you think it's a different... I mean, just you've got instinct here. I mean, you know, not.
I think that you may be correct here. I think Stephen Austin, who I don't think has actually seen these fossils up close, would tend to apply his floating log map
That's what
theory
I'm getting at, yeah.
on this. And Ian, who really studies these extensively, he's been here 5 or 6 times. And one thing that also happens is that the cliffs themselves are quite unstable. And each year there's about 6 inches of cliff that's eroded away.
See, to me this belies the whole idea of, well, the Carboniferous period, Doug, was what, 300 million years ago?
Yeah. 300
and something like that, 3.25 million years ago,
Yeah,
supposedly?
we were speculating on that. Well, if it's eroding away at 6 inches a year, well, where was it 350 million years ago?
And see, that is a catch-22 for the evolutionary thing, because on the face of it, if they say, well, maybe the erosions were different, that kills their uniformitarian logic, which is how they get the whole premise built up on, that the present is the key to the past. The stuff we see happening today is the way it's always been, and that's why it took so many millions of years to lay this much this much sediment or stuff down. So they're kind of messed up either way they go, because 6 inches a year, Doug, 325 million years, you do the math, those fossilized beds would have been so high and so thick and so all-pervasive, there'd have been nothing else, you know?
So here's the scenario. You have 18,000 feet of strata at least built up, and then it's tilted on the edge.
Part. Okay.
And then it's totally planed off flat.
Wow, okay.
On the top. And, you know, what this means to me is that there was, at the flood's runoff, that's when that got planed flat.
Okay, so do you think that the tilting happened while it was still plastic, but somewhat stable, and there was volcanism that tipped it up or something?
It was probably actually a continental plate shift.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Now, this fossil here is a little bit different than the Sigillaria. This is called a Calamites.
Calamites.
Calamites is and we've got a couple of these
it sounds like when people say God Almighty.
Yeah.
You know, it's Calamite. You know.
This is a Calamites. This is a Calamites, and what these are, we have actually a modern equivalent of these today. They're called horsetails.
Oh, really? Wow. These must have been some major horsetail.
Some of these are huge. Okay.
Wow.
Normally, what we find horsetails today, they're about 18 inches or so. But these are huge, and
what do you think the height of that one would have been, Doug? Probably.
Oh, maybe 20 feet or something like that.
Oh,
now here's the question that you have, and I think there's actually modern equivalents of these things today as well.
Hey, what would they be called?
Well, maybe I'm lying. I don't know. But
maybe we don't want to.
Okay, they're lycopods. Okay, they're scale trees, and there's. It says our modern lycopods, club mosses, are small-scale relatives of some of their larger Carboniferous ancestors, and never grow to be a few centimeters in height, like those illustrated here. But these things are huge. What does that tell you, Rich?
Well, it obviously tells you that the world was a much different place before the flood. That's for sure. There were different atmospheric or genetic components. Atmospheric's got to be different. Yeah. Something had to be different, and after the flood, things really got diminished in scale for a lot of several reasons. The same reason the animals have been reduced in size and abundance is probably the same reason the plants were. Even though the species are still around, they're a shell of their former self, so to speak.
And the fact that the species are still around is also an indication that where's the evolution here? You know, the only evolution we see is size. And it's a diminishing in size rather than an increase in size. You'd expect that if life was evolving and improving and changing to more complex forms, that you would get something that's actually growing larger than these things.
See, unless you want to make the case, which can be made for maybe certain instances, that miniaturization is better. I mean, it works better for computer stuff, right, Doug? Yeah. But generally speaking, when you get smaller, you're not generally as robust. I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, to a point. And I'm getting there saying that there's certain conditions. Everything seems to be diminished, Doug. The history of the world, we've talked about this many times, and out there in the audience there, we've talked about the history of the world is not new things being created, but actually extinction, diminution of size. I don't even know if I said that word right, but whatever. Things get smaller, weaker, not more robust, not stronger, not healthier, based on the fossil evidence that we see, and that goes with the animal kingdom as well as the plant kingdom.
Now here's the very interesting thing to me. When I didn't know this, but the person who actually documented this place the first time was Charles Lyell himself.
Really?
And I think it was Richard Dawson, the Canadian geologist, that they did the Geologic Survey of Canada. And here's the thing that I'm really amazed at is that they actually looked at these things and came to their evolutionary conclusions with it, but they had to have been blind. They had to have been totally blind to the implications of these things. And they had to have had an agenda to become so blind to the obvious flood geology possibilities of this
and there had to be, Doug. At that time, for whatever reason, man was trying to throw off the shackles, so to speak, of Christianity, Doug. They were trying to throw off the shackles of the Bible being the inerrant Word of God, and they were going to find anything that would help them and lend credence to that agenda, that philosophy, that way of looking at things. But blinding, that's of course what they were. They were blinded by their own way of wanting things to be. Because you're right, Doug, you look at the same stuff and you go, I don't see evolution here, I see devolution.
That's right, yeah.
I see things getting worse off, not better off. And be that, and I see a real textbook almost, in stone that testifies to a cataclysmic judgment or a cataclysm of, maybe I won't call it a judgment, you get that from the biblical text, but at least some kind of a cataclysm that was here, causing these uptilting and these fossilization, which is done by rapid burial. There had to have been tidal and sediment all at the same time in massive quantities, Doug, for this to have happened.
That's right. And the other thing, there's one thing, I don't have an example here with me, but we actually found a big one on the beach that it was a turbidite. A turbidite is a mud flow. It's an indication that water has to be moving very rapidly in order for this formation to form. And it was something that you couldn't pick up. It was so heavy. But it was there's all these mounds of mud, and it's something that's created by rapid deposition. And mud flows. Turbidites were what they thought was responsible for. There was an earthquake, like in the 40s or something like that, that caused a rapid mud flow of turbidites across the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, and it started to break cables. The cables, telephone cables, and they could tell how fast it was moving, based upon how often that the cables were breaking.
But a turbidite, isn't it? I mean, that's the sand or the sediment that's become lithified, though, right?
Right.
Was it getting lithified under the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean? This was happening down there, too, in modern times?
This was in modern times.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And so
I've heard
we
about
have
the cables being torn up, but I didn't know that it was caused by that.
Yeah, and when you take a look at the sediments formed at that time, they display these type of actions. And if you can imagine this being the early stages of the Noah's flood, and this deposition taking place, and you have one tidal wave coming in very rapidly, and another one coming back out, you can just see what kind of action that has with the rocks and the sediment that is performing there. Now, even with the tides that we saw there, which although they're the highest tides in the world, they are relatively mild in comparison to what would have happened during the flood.
Yeah, they're in flood, the waves are actually over all this.
And I've got a picture of the same spot in high tide and low tide.
Oh, do you?
That was pretty cool, because at high tide, it laps right up against the fossil cliffs.
Oh, yeah, we can show them. We going to show them that, Doug?
Yeah, but at low tide, the water is actually, the beach is actually a kilometer wide.
Because I've walked that beach not knowing that there was all these fossils. By the way, you're not supposed to dig these fossils out of the cliff. Doug got these all on the beach. You're allowed to pick those up, so that's pretty good. I wanted to ask you, Doug.
That's probably going to change someday.
Yeah, well, what kind of a fossil, is this the lepidodendron or is this something else?
Well, let's look it up here.
Because I was just curious that there's really some interesting textures on here.
Okay. I think it's the Sigillaria.
Sigillaria? Now this one.
That one looks like Sigillaria as well.
They're both Sigillarias. Okay, so you don't have any of these, do you?
Well, I don't have any of them here, but I got pictures of them that that we took it on the site, because there was
Okay.
a couple of them that actually broke apart a rock, and this beautiful fossil about this long came out of it. And,
Really? You have that?
we have that. I have it on camera. It's too heavy to pick up.
Oh, how much did it weigh, probably?
Oh, it's definitely too much to take on the airplane.
Oh,
Maybe 50
that's right.
pounds.
I keep thinking you drove. See, when I went out there, Doug, I drove out there. So yeah.
But we also picked up. Actually, we couldn't pick this one up either. There was a tree trunk about this tall, and it was about this big around.
Man.
And it was huge. And but it was interesting because you could go up and look in the tilted strata, and it's actually tilted about 40 degrees. And so,
Yeah, so
so it was quite on an angle. Actually, the tree trunks are perpendicular to it, and you could see a whole bunch.
okay,
of
so the
those.
tree trunks kind of go like is it tilted like this? So tree trunks go like that, kind of.
No, it's tilted.
Which way is it tilted?
The tilt is sort of like this.
Like this. Okay, so the
And
tree
then
trunks.
tree trunks come up through like this.
Okay, all right. I'll have to see. Okay.
And
Can you
actually,
see the tree trunks?
this is a good illustration.
Okay,
of that.
well, yeah, you can see. You can see the. Oh, I see what you're saying. Gotcha. Yeah.
Well.
Well, we'll show. We'll show. Get a close up on this. Get a close up on this. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, it's
So, yeah.
so it's tipped like that, and it's pretty.
How long were you out there, Doug? Were you there
Well,
all-
we were in Joggins for 3 days. Actually, parts of 3 days. We were on the beach 1 full day.
Did you walk or did you do any jogging? I
We
just threw that in
didn't,
for the heck of it, you know.
Yeah, we were. There was a jog in the road.
Yeah. Why do they call it Joggins? By the way? Is that named after someone in particular, or is it? I mean, do you know where the name?
I don't
comes
know the story about that.
Okay.
But
Is it a park or is it just?
well, the Joggins is actually the name of the town.
All right.
And there's another town you go through called River Hebert, and
All right.
and there's little tiny towns, and they're sort of rough farms with sheep, and it's very picturesque in terms of.
And this is actually in New Brunswick, Doug. Is that where this is at?
No, this is right across the border in Nova Scotia.
So it is in Nova Scotia then. Okay. All right.
And to get to this place, what you need to do is to, if I were to do it again, I would fly into Moncton, which is maybe a half an hour away from the spot, and that's a fairly good sized town.
You know, Doug, I might be tempted to drive out there just so I could pick up some of those big fossils and get them to me. You know, to make it maybe a week of it and just drive out there and go out there and grab some of the stuff and bring it back.
Yeah.
Since it's okay by now, but maybe someday it might not be. You
Yeah,
know?
they're looking for a world-class fossil site or something like the UNESCO site, and of course, when they get in touch with that, then they can't even touch anything.
Yeah, you can't touch anything, so those days will be done. But it's kind of nice, Doug, that there's still some areas that you can actually go and get stuff. I still remember Wyoming. My mother used to go out and pick up like arrowheads, you know, just pick them up. Now, you know, you couldn't dare touch anything like that. But they were laying all over the ground. You know, she's got a whole collection of them. But this is probably going to be the same thing. So it's neat. You got quite a collection here. And this isn't all of them, though, right, Doug? This is not all that you got?
Well, I think Larry's got a few too.
Does he?
But,
Okay.
this is my collection.
That's a big chunk right there.
Yeah.
This thing probably weighs. I bet this weighs probably 5 pounds anyway, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe 10. I don't think it weighs 10, but you know, good 5, 10, maybe 5, between 5 and 10. So that's a neat chunk of tree there, you know.
Yeah, and
There were. I noticed, Doug, there's no animals in here. Were there any animal fossils there that you saw?
actually there's amphibian fossils in it.
Okay.
And there's actually tracks of that you can see in the rocks, and I've got some pictures of the tracks.
They have a name for that amphibian? Is it?
Yeah, let's see if we can find that here.
Yeah.
Amphibian.
I'm always asking him questions he doesn't have the direct answer to, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Pretty good though.
It's called Hylomenus lyellii because it's I think is one of the things that Lyell talked about. And
Yeah, I think we got Lyle. Yeah.
There's also an Arthropluria, which is sort of like a.
Looks like a big centipede or
yeah,
something like that, or a
yeah.
millipede type creature. Yeah. Looks like there's some cephalopods or something here. Is that what these? Yeah. So did
And
you
then
see any of
there's
those
a
out there? When you,
Dendropteron. We didn't see any of those type of fossils except in the museum. There is a Fundy Geological Museum that is in Parsboro, which is just across the little neck of land that Joggins sticks out on.
Okay.
And Parsboro actually has some of the highest tides in the world there.
You know, like, I bet you this place here, Doug, is one of the places. You know, when I was growing up reading all about the Carboniferous period and the age of the amphibians, I bet it was they got a lot of their type ideas from this place here. Especially if you talk about the Lyell, you know, basically knew about this. And I think of all the pictures I had in the books growing up, you know, and Prehistoric World and stuff by Roy Chapman Andrews and all the stuff I used to read by. What was a guy named Colson? Not Colson. He was a natural history museum guy. And they always had the stories of these. And this just looks like the world they made you envision. Right. Yet, really, what we find, Doug, it's really a world that was destroyed.
It's an ecological niche that was destroyed.
Yeah.
And you know, to actually figure out how this actually worked in the flood times. And to deposit 18,000 feet of this.
Wow! Wow!
You know, that is a little bit boggling in mind. It's a problem for both creationists and evolutionists.
Yeah.
But because here's the deal: what we have is what we find in the present, and we have to extrapolate back in the past to figure out what the present was all about. And there's
like
ripple
how you get
marks
fossilized watermarks, how ripple marks. How in the heck do you get fossilized stuff? I mean, it had to be the water had to go in, and then had to be covered with sediment or something. Right. I mean, that's just not, I mean, the weird stuff how that could have happened. You know, it's amazing to me. And
either in creationists or evolutionists, you have
it's tricky.
It's difficult to really imagine all of this, but that's what we're finding at Joggins. And I hope that you enjoyed our
fascinating place, Doug.
Our talk about this, and we'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.